Dr. V. Chandrasekar is working as lecturer in philosophy in the Ramakrishna Mission Vivekananda College since 1996. He has been awarded the degree of PhD by the University of Madras for his work in the area Yoga and Analytical Psychology. He has been teaching Indian philosophy, Western philosophy, and recent European philosophy for undergraduate and postgraduate students. He has participated in many seminars and presented papers in a variety of topics. He has also reviewed 2 books in ethics and Indian culture published by the Tamil Nadu Textbook Society for +2 courses.
Welcome to UGC series of lectures in philosophy. I have been dealing with Greek philosophy part 15, and here, as I showed in the slide, it will be dealing with the shift in philosophical standpoint in the Greek thought, namely from natural philosophy to human philosophy. What is this? This is what I was telling in the last class, wherein we start off with a discussion on the philosophy of sophists. Sophists were philosophers who dealt with what virtue is to people, and to be precise, before them there were philosophers who were dealing with what this reality is, what this world is, what is the ultimate principle governing this world. That is why it was dealing with nature. However, the advent of sophists saw a new trend in philosophy, wherein people were concerned with what the human being is. In fact, we can put it like this: they were trying to look into reality within man, not outside man. Before them, people are looking into reality from outside, but here these were the philosophers who were looking into man, and in fact they were more concerned with teaching man how to live and how to be successful in the society. That is why I said that their philosophies can be called as human philosophy. I was talking about the basic definition of sophism and things like that. We will go into it now. In the last class, we saw the meaning of sophism, and then we saw the introduction of the sophists as a class of intellectuals who taught courses on virtue. And here I should tell you, virtue should not be understood in the sense that we understand now, but it means a capacity to perform one's function successfully. And next point that we saw was the important sophists identified, namely Protagoras, and then of course Gorgias, Prodicus, Hippias, Thrasymachus and others. Then their times, rise of democracy and decay. Here I should tell you one thing: the time of the sophists marks 2 tendencies in Greek thought. On the one hand, it was the decay of religion, and on the other hand, it was the rise of democracy. Democracy, of course, do not understand it in the way that we understand it now. In those days, it was all mini states. Every small hamlet was a state, and each one had representative governments. That was the democracy that they had in mind at that time, and this is also characterized by decay in religion. What was this decay in religion? This was again due to 2 factors, namely what was considered to be due to the intervention of some divine principle earlier was understood in terms of science and philosophy at this time. This is the first point. Secondly, whatever attribute that we see with respect to man, be it good or bad, could be traced back to the conception of gods in mythological stories. As a result, there was a decay of religion at that time. Sophism arose around that time when there was these 2 tendencies. Next, the sophistic tendency: truth is what I think, the good is what I choose to do. The tendency of the sophists was to bring out the subjective nature here. Normally, when we talk of anything, we talk of 2 principles, namely the subjective principle and the objective principle. Here, when I say that truth is what I think and good is what I do, it denotes that whatever, be it truth or good, it depends on the subject, and there is no objective criteria for it. This is a very important point which should be seen in the sophistic philosophy. Now, the earliest known sophist is Protagoras. He was born in Abdera, a place here, and just for reminding you, when we talk of Greek philosophy, the philosophy that arose in this area fully now is Greek philosophy. In the sense, now this is what is known as Sicily, and this is Italy, and this part is Turkey. Now, if you see Protagoras, he was born here in this place. Of course, he settled down later in Athens. Athens, we all know, the place where philosophy thrived during the time of Socrates and others, but this man was born there and then settled in Athens. And the best important thing here is he was born there, but his views, some of which was not acceptable to the rulers at that place. Therefore, he was banned from Abdera. He fled that place and then settled in Athens, and he was born in about 480 BC and died about 410 BC while he was fleeing. The famous contribution of Protagoras: man is the measure of all things. This is what I have told you, his birth and date of birth, and importantly his charge, the charge against him, namely that of atheism. Now, the most important contribution of Protagoras is the statement, man is the measure of all things. Of course, we will be seeing the meaning of the statement in a few minutes now, but before that let me tell you, he was also charged with atheism. Why? The book, of course, which was not available right now, of Protagoras starts with a statement, namely he writes, as for the gods, I am unable to say whether they exist or whether they do not exist. In his book he says, he starts about the gods saying that he does not know whether God exists or whether they do not exist. So, because of which he was charged with atheism. In those days, one important factor that we see with every philosopher is that anybody who talks against gods, against religion, was banned and made to flee or made to die. Of course, this happened with respect to various philosophers also in the past and also after Protagoras. Same here, same thing here, he was also charged with atheism and was asked to flee. So, he fled that place, that is what I told you earlier. Now, Protagoras' influence on history is significant. Along with other sophists and Socrates, Protagoras was part of a shift in the philosophical focus from the earlier pre-Socratic tradition of natural philosophy to an interest in human philosophy. The contribution of Protagoras. The contribution of Protagoras can be divided into three, that is what we are going to see now, because as I told you, he was more interested in teaching virtue, just like any other sophist. More than that, he was interested in teaching how man ought to be successful in life. For success in life, we have to speak first, we have to be able to communicate. That was told or taught by sophists. In fact, Protagoras was the first to speak about grammar, and one of the main contribution, that is what we are going to see now, that is orthopoeia. It deals with the study of the correct use of words, the correct pronunciation of words. Students, you may be wondering, dealing with philosophy, we are now talking about language, what it is. The fact is that early times, when we talk of philosophy, it was concerning with what the reality is, what the ultimate principle is that is governing this world. But here I told you very clearly that sophists were interested in making people live successfully in this world. As a result, they were talking about language. Let us go back to the contributions now. Please go back to the slide now. The first one, orthopoeia, study of correct use of words. The second contribution is the man measure statement, which I told you earlier, namely man is the measure of all things. We will explain it later. And lastly, agnosticism, claim that we cannot know anything about God. Let us go to orthopoeia now. Orthopoeia, the practical side of his teaching, that is Protagoras' teaching, was concerned with helping students learn to speak well in the courtroom. Later sources describe him as one of the first to write on grammar. Orthopoeia is the study of the correct use of words. When we talk, our talk is comprised of various words forming together in the form of sentences, and each word has got a meaning. When we say that each word has got a meaning, it also implies that when the words are formed together in a statement, that statement also has got meaning. In fact, if you go back to one philosophy in India, they too spoke about the language systems, about the grammar, wherein we talk of words having meaning on its own, but when the words are combined together, that statement also has got meaning, but how it should be? They explain that the words should have meaning by themselves and should also convey meaning when brought together. For example, quench is one word which has got a meaning, thirst is one word which has got meaning, fire is a word which has got meaning, but we can combine them and say that quench your thirst with fire. That does not have a meaning. Therefore, the correct use of words is very, very essential, and Protagoras was very much interested in this because he wanted to tell people how to speak in the courtroom, how to speak in public, and how meaningful a dialogue could be. Therefore, he was very much concerned with the proper use of words, the proper pronunciation of words and the meaning of the words. Therefore, this orthopoeia is the main contribution of Protagoras towards making people understand how successful he can live. Therefore, it is also said that Protagoras may be the first to talk of grammar in those days. Now, of course, we are going to explain man measure statement with an example. This is the statement here, man is the measure of all things. I have given an example also here, the measure of hotness and coldness is obviously the individual person. Now, students, let me ask you one thing, what is hot and what is cold? Which do you consider to be hot and which do you consider to be cold? Is there an objective criteria for that? For example, if I am going to drink a very hot water or hot coffee for example, on a hot humid day, or if I am going to drink hot coffee on a cold day, the temperature of the coffee is going to be the same on both days, but my experience of the hotness of the coffee on a hot day and my experience on a cold day is going to be different. Same way, Miss X or Mr. Y, whoever may be the case, is existing in Chennai, experience a kind of a temperature here. Same place, same time, another person is existing in, say for example, a cold climate place like Ooty, having the same temperature on that particular day. One place in Chennai, it may be too hot for the person, whereas in Ooty the same temperature might not be too hot. Now, what is the criteria of hot or heat? Is there an objective criteria? Of course, we say that there is a temperature, we say that it is 25 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Celsius or whatever it is, but is that going to be the same for everybody? For one it is going to be too hot and for the other is going to be, it is not going to be that very hot, which means the heat of the particular place is going to be determined by our experience and not what it is. Of course, what it is one thing, but how we experience is going to determine whether that is really hot or not, which means that the heat or coldness does not have a objective criteria, but has got only a subjective criteria. This is what Protagoras was trying to arrive at, which we all know even with respect to our own situation. When we are in a kind of a AC room on a cold day, it will be very cool for us, but on a hot day the same place, the same temperature will be very pleasant to us, which means the criteria for heatness or coldness is only with respect to us. That is the important point that Protagoras is trying to make, and therefore, another important thing before I go to the break, I will tell you one thing, namely that this is not going to be an objective criteria, but what man thinks of it. I was talking to you about the hotness or coldness, with which I was trying to explain that the hotness or coldness pertains to subject and there cannot be any objective criteria. What does this mean? Let us see the meaning of Protagoras' statement here. The statement should be understood as each individual man is the standard of what is true to him, and that there is no truth except his sensations and impressions. That is, what is true for X, what is true for Y? According to Protagoras, what is true for X is what his sensations and impressions tell him, and what is true for Y is what the sensations and impressions of Y tells him, and nothing else apart from that. This is what this particular statement means. Moreover, the context of the statement, Protagoras denied the distinction between sense and reason as believed by the early Greeks, who held that truth is to be found by reason and not by sense. Common observation and teaching of Heraclitus suggested to him that truth is dependent on individual subject. This statement, man is the measure of all things, depends on two things, namely on a common observation of what Heraclitus said earlier, that truth is changing, that there is something that is changing, and secondly that truth is founded upon reason. This is an idea which the people have in general. If truth is founded on reason, then it should be the same for everybody, but is it the same for everybody? Truth depends on our sensations and impressions. It is in this context that Protagoras made this statement, man is the measure of all things. Now, there is a serious objection to this statement. If I am going to be the criteria for what I say, or if you are going to be the criteria for what you say, then Protagoras wanted to insist that there is no objective truth, objective reality. That is understandable, but what will be the consequence of this theory, this understanding? Let us see now here in this slide. Some objected, there is objection to the statement, some objected to this because it may lead to injustice and immorality, as it is based on individual observation rather than determining the objective truth. Now, this is a very simple objection raised by the people, namely, if what I think is true and if what you think is true, of course, Protagoras wanted to insist that there is no objective truth, it is agreeable, but this will lead to immorality and injustice, because I may think thieving is good or killing is good. If I do that, will the society accept that? But this statement that what I think is right, what I do is good, may lead to injustice and immorality according to the detractors of this theory. There is an objection which has been taken here, but there is also a reply to this objection, which we will see here. This phrase, namely man is the measure of all things, like many fragments of the pre-Socratics, has been passed down to us without any context and meaning, and hence its meaning is open to interpretation. In fact, Plato ascribed relativism to Protagoras. The reply to this objection is that this statement, man is the measure of all things, has been given to us, and where it has been given, that proof is not available to us, and why it has been given, that is the context in which it has been given, that is also not available to us. Therefore, it has got various interpretations. In fact, Plato ascribes relativism to Protagoras. Whether Protagoras was really interested in talking of relativism, we do not know, but his statement means relativism according to Plato, and same way others also spoke differently. That is one of the reasons why there were detractors to this statement, we can say. There is a reply that we can give to this statement. Another important thing, why did Protagoras come to this kind of a understanding, namely that there is distinction between sensation and reason, and what is his stand on that? When Protagoras spoke about the man measure statement, this was again due to another factor, namely the Protagoras' non-acceptance of the distinction between sensation and reason. Before Protagoras, we can find that people are concerned with two important things, namely sensation and reason. When we talk of what the reality is and how we know the reality, some said that this is the reality and it can be approached only by reason. Of course, this is the case with most of the philosophers, but then please take up the case of Parmenides on the one hand and Heraclitus on the other hand. To Parmenides, there is something that is permanent, that is not that which is not changing. When asked how he knows about it, he says it is my reason which says that there is something permanent, because I see a lot of things in front of me, a table, a chair, everything is existing for some particular period of time, but according to Parmenides there is something permanent, namely the wood, we can say like that. Similarly, the world is changing, but in spite of the change that we see, our reason tells us that there is something permanent in this world. This is the idea that Parmenides develops. But then against Parmenides there was Heraclitus, who said that our experience shows that there is something permanent, but our reason tells that nothing is permanent, because Parmenides was talking of something that is permanent, while Heraclitus was talking of something that is changing. To Heraclitus, we see that so many things are there which appears to be same, but beneath that permanence there is change. This is the idea which Heraclitus gives, but when asked how he comes to that conclusion, he too says that experience, sensations shows the permanence of things, whereas reason alone tells us the change in things, which means the permanence of Parmenides and the change or impermanence developed by Heraclitus is due to the fact of reason and the distinction between sensation and reason. Therefore, Protagoras did not accept this distinction between sensation and reason. Moreover, when we talk of sensation and reason, our reason is dependent upon sensation, and if sensations do not lead us to correct knowledge, what is dependent on sensation, namely the knowledge by reason, that also cannot be taken up to be real. Therefore, this distinction between sense and reason is not acceptable to Protagoras, and that is the reason why he brought in his Magnisia statement. Of course, this is what I have given here. A reason for this non-acceptability: how is there different accounts of the same object by different persons and also difference in sensation. This is what we saw earlier, I will explain about it. Now, the implication of this statement. This statement amounts to the declaration that knowledge is impossible, as found in Gorgias, who said that nothing exists. If it is seen existing, then it cannot be known, and if it is known, it cannot be communicated. Now, the implication of this statement. This statement, namely man is the measure of all things, amounts to declaration that knowledge is not possible. When I say knowledge, of course, it is objective knowledge. What I know, what I do, that is true for me, but what is knowledge? It is something that cannot be known, because what I know, what I do is knowledge for me, what you do, what you know, it is knowledge for you. Therefore, there is no objective criteria for knowledge. Now, because of this, later sophists developed this kind of Protagoras in different manners, and one important person is Gorgias, whose theory can be put in 3 sentences, namely that nothing exists, and if at all it exists, it cannot be known, and even if it can be known, it cannot be communicated. Zeno, a Eleatic, spoke of irreconcilable contradictions in existence. Based on this, Gorgias develops that there is nothing that is existing, and following that he makes 2 statements, namely that nothing is existing, if at all it is existing, it cannot be known, because each one is going to understand it differently, and if at all it is known, it cannot be communicated, because what I know is true to me, it cannot be communicated to you. What you know is true to you, and it cannot be communicated to others. This is a stand which the latest sophists take, and hence there is a kind of understanding where knowledge is not possible. That is the important understanding that we can get from this particular area. The third point in the philosophy of Protagoras, namely agnosticism, which I explained earlier, namely he starts his book by saying that as for gods, I do not know whether they exist or not. This is another important contribution of Protagoras. However, we can look into the consequence of this theory. It is given here. Teachings of the sophists is destructive in nature. It is destructive of religion, of morality, of the foundations of the state and established institutions. This can be held as the demerits of the sophist philosophy. Now, one of the most important demerit of the sophist philosophy is that it was considered to be destructive in nature, because it was destructive of religion, of morality, because there is no objective criteria to understand anything. Therefore, be it religion or morality, there is no objective moral code. Therefore, this is a kind of interpretation which has been brought out by philosophers, which says that the sophistic philosophy is negative. However, in spite of this demerit, there are some positive aspects in sophist philosophy. Let me just give that, and that will summarize the whole discussion for today. Sophists were of respectable nature. They contributed to the advance of learning. Sophists were the first to direct attention to the study of words, sentences and style. Sophists were the founders of the science of rhetoric. Sophists were responsible for the spread of education and culture in ancient Greece, and sophists gave much importance to the study of ethical ideas, and sophists spoke of the right of the subject. Here please note that when I say right of the subject, it reveals an attack against authority. This brought into focus for the first time and emphasized that I cannot be subjugated, but as a rational being have the right to use my reason. Now, the most important contribution of sophists is the right of the subject. In fact, over a period of the history of philosophy, we can find that philosophers were basically concerned with the freedom of the individual. Of course, freedom of the individual we talk in a different sense now, but in the earlier times it was with respect to what freedom we have in spite of the authority or in spite of the tradition or in spite of the religion. So, every philosopher or most of the philosophers were interested in identifying the right of the subject. In fact, today we talk of might as the right. That kind of an idea may be originated with the idea of the sophist. That is why I said it is a revelation of the, or the first revelation of the attack on authority or tradition or religion. That is an important contribution, and this we can say is the merit of the philosophy of the sophists. With this we will be completing the philosophy of the sophists, and from where we will be moving on to an important philosopher, namely Socrates. Socrates' philosophy goes in line with the sophistic tendency, and as I told you, this particular philosopher marks an important turning point in philosophy itself, not only Greek philosophy, but in philosophy itself, because whoever knows philosophy also knows the name of Socrates and what he spoke and what he stood for. Everything is brought out well in his talks, and that will be dealt with from the next class onwards, because that is an important contribution of the second period of the Greek thought. Let me now tell you some model questions for this class. The philosophy of the second period of Greek philosophy is negative. Discuss in the light of the sophistic philosophy. Analyze the merits and demerits of the sophist philosophy. Describe the contribution of Protagoras. Well, students, with these questions I think you can just deal with the idea of the sophists in general and also Protagoras in particular, and know more about this particular period of Greek philosophy, which, as I told you earlier, marks a shift in understanding. The well known statement of Socrates is know thyself. So, what is reality? It is not pointing out somewhere, but pointing within. That know thyself is very important here, and that is a shift in philosophical standpoint here, and that is the characteristic of this period of Greek thought. With this we will end today's class. Thank you.